Hello everyone, I'm Shenli Jiang, a third-year PhD student from Professor Victor Zavala's lab. Today I will talk about how we characterize complex solvent environment in acid-catalyzed reactions using molecular dynamics simulations and 3D convolutional neural networks. For the motivation, the catalytic conversion of biomass is a promising strategy to obtain transportation fuels and high-value chemicals from renewable feedstocks. The conversion of biomass-derived molecules is typically facilitated by a liquid-phase acid-catalyzed reactions that are hindered by low reactivity in aqueous solution. One method to increase acid-catalyzed reaction rates is to modify the solvent composition by mixing organic polar aprotic co-solvents with water to create mixed solvent environments. Such environments have been shown to improve reaction rates up to 100-fold compared to rates for the same reactions in pure water. Unfortunately, identifying solvent environments that improve reaction rates by trial and error experimentation is time-consuming and costly. Here we have an example of the acid-catalyzed reaction and organic polar aprotic co-solvents we studied. In the previous work, we performed classical MD simulations of one reactant molecule in a mixed solvent environment to generate a single 205 nanosecond simulation trajectory for each of the 76 reactant-solvent combinations included in the training set. The predicted value is sigma, which is the kinetic solvent parameter. From each MD trajectory, we calculate 3 physically motivated human-selected descriptors that capture reactant hydrophilicity and solvent interactions. The first one is the preferential exclusion coefficient gamma, which quantifies the reactant-solvent affinity. The second one is the hydrogen bonding lifetime between reactant and water tau, which quantifies the reactant-water bonding. And third one is the accessible hydroxyl fraction, delta, which quantifies the reactant hydrophilicity. One thing to notice is that calculating all MD simulation trajectories will cost 216 hours, which is very time-consuming. On the left, we have a parity plot of the experimental sigma and the predicted sigma from the linear model. Different color represents different reactant. How the marker is filled represents different co-solvents. And different marker shape indicates organic co-solvent weight percentage. A perfect model would have a slope of 1 and a root mean square error of 0. We can see that our linear model does not predict very well. We also tested if a non-linear model could improve upon the predictions of the linear model using the same input data. We performed a 5-fold cross-validation to evaluate a fully connected neural network with 3 hidden layers, each with 10 units, followed by a linear unit for the regression task of predicting the sigma. The behavior of the fully connected neural network model was comparable to that of the linear model. These findings show that reaction rates predicted with multi-descriptor model lie in the correct quadrant with few false positive and false negative. However, both models have significant outliers for systems corresponding to large value of sigma, suggesting that the descriptors fail to capture important information that may be encoded within the complex geometric 3D features of the reactant-solvent environment. Therefore, our first goal is to develop a comprehensive 3D geometric representation for MD data. The second goal is to develop a model that improves reaction rate prediction. Also, we want to uncover important features in the data. The technique we use is convolutional neural network. When I first heard about convolutional neural network, my instinct was that it could only analyze images, such as the image below. However, a convolutional neural network, or CNN, can be applied to any grid-like data. Essentially, the convolution operation is a weighted sum, and it can aggregate local information. Convolutional neural networks can be further generalized to extract features from three-dimensional volumetric data, which can facilitate the analysis of 3D molecular structures. This figure illustrates the approach used to convert MD configuration positions to a grid of voxels. For each set of the atomic position corresponding to a single time sampled during the MD configuration, we centered a 3D histogram on the center of the mass of the reactant. The histogram covered a cubic volume that was divided into 20 times 20 times 20 grid of bins. For each bin, we calculate the normalized occurrence of water molecules by counting the number of water molecules within the bin and normalizing by the maximum number of water molecules within any bin. The same procedure was separately performed to calculate the normalized occurrence of reactant oxygen atoms and a co-solvent in each bin. The normalized water, reactant, and co-solvent occurrences were then stored in red, green, and blue color channels, respectively. To capture the preferential locations of solvent molecules relative to the reactant as they diffuse within the cubic volume, and to prevent the voxels from being unoccupied, we average grid values obtained from multiple consecutive MD configurations to generate a single averaged grid of voxels that we define as voxel representation. Specifically, each voxel representation was generated by averaging grid values from 2 nanoseconds of MD data. And the 20 nanoseconds of MD data can produce 10 voxel representations. We next develop a 3D CNN model, which we call SolventNet, that inputs voxel representation and outputs predicted kinetic solvent parameters. The SolventNet architecture consists of 4 convolutional layers, 2 max pooling layers, and 3 fully connected layers, as shown schematically in this figure. We also compare SolventNet to other 3D CNN models, such as VoxelNet and Orion 3D CNN, to investigate how the 3D CNN architecture influences prediction accuracy. All 3 models include a final layer with a linear activation unit for the regression task of predicting sigma. The 3D CNs were evaluated using 5-fold cross-validation, similar to the procedure used for human-selected descriptor models, and with 24-fold rotational data augmentation. It should be noted that for the 3D CNs, since we are only using 20 nanoseconds of MD data instead of 205 nanoseconds, the training and the testing reduced the computational cost of MD simulation at least 10 times. The bottom figure shows the parity plot between predicted sigma and experimental sigma. Compared to the baseline human-selected multi-descriptor model, SolventNet significantly improves the prediction of kinetic solvent parameters with a best fit slope of 0.89 and a root mean square error of 0.37. This plot further indicates that root mean square errors obtained using all 3 3D CNNs are comparable and outperform the multi-descriptor models. A potential issue when training CNNs is a large number of learned parameters, which may lead to overfitting. We next assessed the accuracy of SolventNet for the 32 reactant-solvent combination included in the test set. The prediction accuracy slightly degrades compared to the predictions of the validation set. Solvent net still generalize very well. These findings suggest that solvent net extracted features of the reactant solvent environment that are important to reaction performance and that are generalizable across different reactant solvent combinations. We also want to know what does the solvent net learn from the data using saliency maps. The idea of a saliency map is that we want to know which grade in the input has a big impact on the model prediction by perturbing a little with the input. For example, if we perturb a little with the input grade A, the prediction changes a lot, say -1.5 to 2.5. We know that grade A is important. Here are some images that show the areas of saliency or importance for accurate classification. In this example, the saliency map shows the part of the image that makes the model think that the image contains a bird. The saliency map for 3D CNN is split into separate 3D grids of voxels for reactant, co-solvent, and water channels, with each voxel colored according to its normalized saliency value using the same color scheme as the input voxel representation. Transparent voxels are unimportant to model predictions. Inspection of the saliency map confirms that solvent net primarily recognize the features of the solvent environment within a local domain near the reactant. In agreement with the assumption underlying the definition of human-selected descriptors, saliency maps for each channel are further projected from 3D to 2D by averaging saliency values along the z-axis to generate the control plot. These plots clearly show that the regions near the reactant are most important for predictions. And the size of the simulated volume is sufficiently large that regions far from the reactant are unimportant. In conclusion, we transform the MD simulation data into a voxel representation. We develop a 3D CNN called solvent net that predicts acid-catalyzed reaction rates accurately in aqueous mixtures with polar aprotic co-solvents. Solvent net generalized to new polar aprotic co-solvents and reactants not used during the model training. And using computationally inexpensive solvent net, we are able to do scalable solvent screening in the future. Finally, I would like to thank my collaborators Alex, Weiqi, Reid, and Victor, and our funding agency. I also want to thank Center for High Throughput Computing for the GPU resources. With that, I'm happy to take any questions.